Hello everyone, welcome to the ICSE 2022 paper presentation. I am Suman Biswas from Iowa State University. This work is in collaboration with Muhammad Wardat and my PhD advisor Professor Ridesh Rajan. I am going to present our paper entitled The Art and Practice of Data Science Pipelines. We conducted a comprehensive study of data science pipelines in theory, in the small and in the large. So let's begin. Data-driven software are being developed more than ever in the recent past. Right now, we have availability of numerous data in different forms. And also, we have access to powerful enough machines to process those datasets. Many methods and new techniques and algorithms are being developed to extract value out of the data. The novel ML and AI techniques are creating pathways to develop such data science software for agriculture, healthcare, education, finance, and whatnot. Some of these software are replacing the traditional software, and some are being developed as component of legacy software. In this paper, we took a step to understand and outline the design and architecture of such data science software. So if we look at traditional software development process, we have to go through requirement analysis, design, implementation, testing, and maintenance. And data science software also go through these processes. However, these software have some new set of characteristics which make them distinct from traditional software. For example, data science software are data intensive and model driven, which make them uncertain and non-deterministic. And also often the decision of prediction of this software are hard to interpret or explain. And what happens is these new characteristics create new architectural properties of data science software. Especially we found that data science pipeline as an emerging architecture, which is used in many works. The data science pipeline architecture is basically the sequential set of stages followed in the development process. Let's talk about it in more detail. So to illustrate the data science pipeline architecture, we show two examples here. On the left, you can see a data science program. It is a Jupyter Notebook example from Keras repository. In different cells, different tasks have been implemented. You can see code for importing packages, data acquisition, data pre-processing, modeling, training, and evaluation. On the right is a GitHub project for face classification, basically classifying gender and emotion. If we look at the organization of source files, they serve similar stages like modeling, training, pre-processing, or combination of some stages. These two examples have different kind of pipeline architecture but consists of similar set of stages. This is the definition of a canonical data science pipeline. The collection of stages like acquisition, cleaning, or pre-processing, modeling, training, etc. are referred to as a data science pipeline. This architecture is very well used in literature and in practice, but until now, the pipelines are developed and described in an ad hoc way. We don't know what are the different types of pipelines and what are the typical stages. Also, how are the stages connected and how the pipelines are different in their theoretical representation and that in the practice. Our paper focuses on these questions. Here we show a couple of examples of data science pipelines discussed in the literature. So this is an architecture of ML system described by Google engineers. Along with the ML code in the middle, you can see many different stages like data collection, feature extraction, configuration, serving, etc. They did not show it as sequential stages, but with separated modules. Here is a software engineering process described by Microsoft researchers. The pipeline has 9 stages such as training, evaluation, deployment with feedback loops. Unlike the previous one, it is not presented as a software architecture, but the software process followed by development teams. It is another pipeline used in the popular AutoML and machine learning optimization tool called Teapot. They presented some similar stages like feature engineering, data pre-processing, but also some new stages which are specific to this tool like the parameter optimization. After studying all those available pipelines and data science software from open source, we made these contributions. First, we contributed 3 different representations of pipelines which are in theory, in the small and in the large. We standardized the semantics and vocabulary of each representation. Then we showed how we can analyze the pipeline architecture, such as we used API-based analysis to identify stages in data science pipelines. Next, we contributed a collection of pipelines that can be used as inspiration for building new pipelines and towards new research in the area. And finally, our comparative analysis shows several patterns and existing problems in designing data science software. We found three different kinds of data science pipelines. First, pipelines in theory. So many research presented a DS pipeline architecture for different purposes. We conducted a literature review on 71 such pipelines. Secondly, pipelines in the small. We collected 105 notebooks for different data science competitions in Kaggle. These standalone programs solving well-defined tasks. We parsed those notebooks and extracted pipelines from that. Third, pipelines in the large. We noticed that large data science projects form pipelines that are different than the standalone notebooks. So we analyzed such 21 matured projects from GitHub. And on each of these kinds, we asked the above three research questions. What is the representative pipeline, how they are organized, and what are their characteristics? Let's begin with pipeline in theory. We searched for peer-reviewed articles with keywords like data science pipelines, machine learning lifecycle, etc. From a large pool, we selected 1,566 papers. Then we filtered the papers that are actually presenting and describing end-to-end pipeline and that are published in the last decade. Besides, we also searched for popular press articles and patents and industry blogs. Thus, we found 71 DS pipelines from literature. We adopted an open coding scheme to label all these pipelines. Essentially, two raters labeled what stages are there, what is the goal of the pipeline, and what category it belongs to. Then we reconciled the disagreement to form representative pipeline with common vocabulary. We presented the labels for each of the pipelines. For designing a new data science pipeline, one can find the closely related one and then look at the possible stages and connections, and if they're missing any of the stages. I'll talk about some of the most important findings from here. So we created this representative pipeline with three layers: pre-processing, model building, and post-processing layer. There are 11 different stages under these layers and possible connections between them. Many pipelines are using different terminologies, but we standardized them and identified the subtasks that are listed below here under each stage. The common terminology will allow comparative analysis over different types of pipelines. Here are the frequency of the stages in the pipelines. We can see most of the data science pipelines have modeling stage, but other model building stages like evaluation, prediction are not very frequent. Pre-processing stages are also very common. Some pipelines contain only a very few stages. In these cases, the articles abstract away specific stages and present broad stages. Another thing is still you don't see many pipelines are considering post-processing stages. Prior work showed that significant cost and effort is spent in the post-development. So data science related post-processing like model serving, updating data, interpretation, this should be considered carefully. When we looked at the available pipelines, we see the goals are either describing a specific data science solution or to generalize the data science tasks. In both cases, we found the pipelines are designed in an ad hoc manner. There is no common terminology and design specification. Furthermore, the stages do not have strict boundaries in the DS lifecycle, and there is no guidelines for modularizing the stages. Further research is needed here so that interoperable and comparable pipelines can be built. Feedback loop is not uncommon in software engineering lifecycle, but in data science, the feedback loop is more common. For example, if a system faces a real-world challenge in modeling, it has to update the algorithm, and in turn, it affects the data pre-processing and feature engineering in previous stages. We found that feedback loops to a distant stage is more expensive, and also a feedback loop is more common because data science consists of many stakeholders like ML engineers, data scientists, and data levelers who work in a very distributed environment. Furthermore, there are many tasks like sampling, feature selection that are entangled. So it creates case principle. That means changes anything, changes everything. Finally, there are many feedback loops which are hidden or become visible only during the implementation. Okay, so we found these three different types of pipelines in theory. First, the machine learning pipelines. These are the most used ones. They're building like supervised and unsupervised predictive models, and these pipelines are very much focused on algorithms and modeling and learning. And second, this one is a data engineering pipeline. It is focused on data mining, collection, storage, etc. These do not focus on learning from data and not modeling intensive. These may not involve machine learning algorithms, but only statistical and mining techniques. Third, this is the team process pipelines. Here the stages are defined with human activities like study design, preparation, etc. And these are not software architecture, but how teams and developers divide their tasks in different stages. So let's move on to the pipeline in the small. For these, we have collected the top-rated data science notebooks from Kaggle. As you know, Kaggle is one of the most popular platforms for sharing data science tasks, data sets, and solutions. One can host or participate in competitions and share their solutions. We collected solutions from all these competitions and did not include tutorials or toy projects. Then we filtered most voted solutions and which contain end-to-end pipeline. And thus we got 105 Kaggle notebooks for analyzing pipelines in the small. This is how we extract pipelines automatically from the notebooks. First, we create a dictionary of APIs which are used in these notebooks. Basically, we look at the API documentation for popular libraries and map those APIs to stages. For example, all these APIs you can see here under sklearn.preprocessing, and they are basically doing data preparation stage. And then we build a tool that takes the dictionary and the notebooks and then build pipeline representation automatically. To do that, we parse the notebooks into AST and extract the API calls. Thus, we can tell what are the sequential stages it goes through. This method could be used towards static analysis of pipelines in future works. This one is the representative view of pipeline in the small. We see that some stages from theory are not present here, like data storage, implementation, communication, and deployment. That is because these are not production scale pipelines and do not intended for reuse. So these 6 stages are the most common ones. Among these, evaluation occur infrequently because in many cases evaluation is done through visualization and human understanding, and therefore it does not reflect in the API based automatic pipeline extraction. Other than that, we notice that many pipelines spend a lot of time for exploratory data analysis before going to the modeling or prediction. But often many of such exploratory code is not shared in the notebook since the final prediction may not need those. Today we don't have good pipeline versioning tools that operate with model, data, and code at the same time. Well, by analyzing our automatically extracted pipelines, we plot this chart which shows the occurrence of stages before and after each stage. Here each color represents a stage, so since the colors are essentially distributed over all the bars here, we can say there is no clear separation of stages. The notebooks frequently changes between stages which are hard to debug, test, or maintain. Especially, we found that data preparation stage is very frequent. It is tangled with all other stages. For example, in this code snippet of a pipeline, you can see it's basically creating the convolutional model, but calling some reshaping and resizing operator after each layer. This phenomenon is creating pipeline jungles, which could be resolved by designing the pipeline early and modularizing the stages. Also, the API design could be done from the pipeline organization point of view that will make the stages straightened instead of tangled. And we found that many of the pipelines still attempts to make them modular for readability and easy to debug purposes. This is an example of such a pipeline. And here the developer divides the notebook into these stages you can see here, data statistics, transformation, data interaction, etc. This is not the API based low level pipeline, but the developer abstract away the low level stages. Furthermore, these high level pipelines are similar to the ones we observed in theory. And we found that more than 30% of the pipelines are doing that. It shows the need for such high level modularization and pipeline structure. Currently, we do not have IDE support for such pipeline organization. Jupyter notebooks or similar platforms can provide pipeline templates, which can be very helpful. Okay, now we are in the final section of the presentation, pipeline in the large. So pipeline in the small were specific to a data set and task. But here these solutions are large and not limited to single source files. They serve like more general data science tasks such as machine comprehension or object detection, etc. We collected large GitHub projects and filtered the matured projects which are not a library or a tutorial. These are like 21 curated projects for the analysis. We also extract the project size, number of contributors, etc., and to do further analysis. These allow us to analyze both high-level and low-level pipelines. And so here is an example of the high-level pipeline in the project called QNet, which does machine reading. If we look at the architecture, we see that a shell script is used to download data, and then config.py is called to set the parameters and integrate other modules. Then other modeling, training, and predictions are done using different scripts. However, if we look at each source file separately, they have different low-level operators as well. For example, only model.py uses several data preprocessing, modeling, and evaluation stages. That is the distinction between the high-level and low-level pipelines. This is the representative pipeline in the large. We found same frequent 6 stages here too: acquisition, preparation, modeling, training, evaluation, and prediction. However, we found two main phases of the pipeline. The first is the development phase in the top, and then the post-development phase in the bottom. In development phase, the pipeline solves the general problem and builds the model artifacts for future uses. It does not focus on the prediction but focuses on the modeling stage. In post-development phase, the main goal is to obtain the pre-trained model and possibly retrain the new data and then make predictions. Let's look at this example. In this project called KittySeg, a large training is done to export these model artifacts in JSON format, which is then used in post-development. The repository mentions that only 250 new data points can be used to retrain and make predictions. We found two types of pipelines in the large: loosely coupled and tightly coupled. They differ mainly because of the number of contributors. In our benchmark, when the number of contributors is more than 6, we see a loosely coupled architecture. In that case, we see multiple entry points to the pipeline and many modules are reused multiple times. The users have also more flexibility and may choose to run part of pipelines. On the other hand, in tightly coupled pipelines, we see only 1 or 2 entry points and the stages are strictly coupled. We found many such sub-pipelines which can be reusable, but there is no common tool or framework to make them interoperable and that span over project boundaries. Nowadays, CI/CD tools are widely used in traditional software lifecycle, like for automated compilation, building and testing, or deploying. But we did not find any of the pipelines in the large is using any of the CI/CD tools. But when we were analyzing pipelines in theory, we found like there are some tools available like Databricks or Microsoft Azure. However, the projects are not using that, but they are actually demonstrating the need, because we found they are using shell script to automatically download data, using Docker container for environment setup, and then even Python notebooks for running the modules. So we see there is a large gap between the CI/CD needs in open source and the tools available today. I thank NSF and Tripods Institute D4 at Iowa State for funding the project. I am also grateful to the members of Laboratory for Software Design. So in this work, we presented the state of the art of a well-used data science software architecture called pipeline. We also presented several analysis techniques of the existing kinds of pipelines. Furthermore, we identified a number of entry patterns in their characteristics, which call for actions from researchers, engineers, and data scientists. The preprint of the paper and the accepted artifact can be obtained from the links in the bottom. So thank you very much for listening.